Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my privilege to introduce my fellow Kansan, Mike Bergmeyer. Mike is the owner of Shield Ag Equipment in Hutchinson, Kansas. Shield Ag has been in business for 75 years and is a small manufacturer that meets the needs of farmers with tools and assemblies required for sustainable modern agriculture. And I'll say I've known Mike's equipment long before I knew Mike in our own operation. His customers are regional and international with distributors in Canada, Europe, Asia, Mexico, New Zealand, and Australia. Mike currently employs 44 full-time and 5 to 6 seasonal part-time employees. Mike is a graduate of 2 outstanding universities, Kansas State and Wichita State. He also served his community for 8 years on the local school board. Mike and his wife Angie are parents of 6 children and reside outside of Hutchinson. And I welcome him to Washington to share his testimony today, and thank you for being here and joining us today, Mike.
Thank you, Representative Healthcamp. My name is Mike Bergmeyer. My wife Angie and I own Shield Agricultural Equipment, South Hutchinson, Kansas. The economy of the United States was built around the 3 super sectors that create wealth: mining, agriculture, and manufacturing. I'm proud to own a small business within manufacturing in direct service to agriculture. The only way to create wealth is to create it out of something tangible, hard, growable, or renewable. When a president or a politician from either party starts talking about creating jobs, I worry, because government spending does not create wealth for the human race. And the more jobs balance shifts away from the big 3, the poorer we become as a nation. That's why I'm here today for my children, not for me, to tell you why my children might not have the same opportunities I did to own a business and employ people. With all respect, please allow me the time to discuss these government functions that inhibit the ability for me to grow my business. And you'll see the danger down the road for my children. It's difficult for most politicians and business leaders to pin down overregulation. It just seems there are no specifics, just talk about there being too many. I liken these government regulations to the eastern red cedar tree. Cedar trees supply windbreaks and shelter for farms and domestic and wild animals where I live. Having more of them seems to be a good thing. I have plenty of cedar trees. The problem is that one cedar tree left unattended becomes about a dozen within a year, and then 100 within a few years, and 1,000 within a decade. And you get to the point where you can't grow or maintain your farm and ranch your livestock. The blue stem quits growing because the cedar trees suck up all the resources. You have to spray more invasive weeds because they'll grow where the grass won't. And you look back on it and say, where did all these cedar trees come from? And you can't pick out any one cedar tree that's the culprit. The only real option is to get out the chainsaw and cut down as many as you can without much regard for the good trees or the bad trees, because my quarter of grassland became dysfunctional and I had to do something. Here's a sampling of the forest of laws and regulations that keep me from expanding my business. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act of 2010. My company will remain at 44 full-time and 4 to 15 part-time employees. Any benefits to PPACA aside, this is the real issue. It hurts the people you're trying to help the most, folks in the lower and middle income classes. Those 4 to 15 part-time men and women will not have access to my health care insurance, and I won't expand. As my company paid total health care insurance premiums increased by $45,000 a year, that's one person I can't hire. It's that simple. I have to make payroll every Friday, and I got to pay my suppliers on time. So let's go back to the cedar tree thing again. The following is a list of just a few of the new forest of regulations that are impediments to growth. The RIN numbers are listed in my written testimony and all have potential onerous effects on any future expansion. From the EPA, stormwater runoff revisions to Section 402P of the Clean Water Act, and the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, revisions to hazardous chemical reporting, risk and technology reviews for foundries, from the Department of Labor and OSHA, electrical power and distribution protection, trip, slip, and fall safety improvements, and the new revisions to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for Particulate Matter, dust, under Title I of the Clean Air Act. By the way, it's 522 pages long and impossible to interpret. There are at least 200 rules, laws, and regulations out there that my business falls under, and expansion is just not worth the trouble. My bankers spend more time on the banking regulations that regulate the regulations than they do in processing business loans. Full implementation of Basel III capital requirements will impair the ability of business lenders to provide funds for expansion. The federal tax code is incomprehensible and nearly impossible to comply with. The forest of cedar trees is just too thick. When you increase my taxes, I just react. I don't hire the next person. I don't purchase a new piece of equipment. And I don't improve my operations and expand into new opportunities. As I fear that my kids won't have an opportunity to own a new business, a small business, or work in one of the big three wealth creation industries due to burdensome government regulation and law, I also worry that their education will not position them to be future leaders. The education system in the U.S. is broken. We spend more money per student on education than any of the other 11 most developed countries in the world, with lesser outcomes than most of the other 11. I implore you to completely gut in No Child Left Behind and AYP standards. Allow the states and locals to determine what's best for the lifelong earners we are trying to raise. In closing, I got to tell you the truth. You don't owe me nothing. I was born with nothing, raised in a great family environment, educated at a small rural school, and I graduated from the finest land-grant university in the United States in '83, and I moved to Hutch with nothing but a college degree from Kansas State and a used pickup truck. You can overtax and underserve me, I really don't care, because I love my family and I love my employees and other stakeholders, and I will continue to work to make a living because that's what I do. And the USA continues to be a great country to operate a small business. I will leave this life someday and report to God with nothing, and that's fine by me. What I'm asking you to consider is making sure that my children, grandchildren, and future generations of Americans have the same opportunities that I have, and that you don't overtax and regulate business to the extent that nobody wants to take the risk anymore of joining in the great triangle of wealth-producing industry. We all owe that to our children. Thank you very much.
Certainly appreciate testimony from Mr. Bergmeyer. And we were talking, and generally the hearing theme is made in the U.S., and I know Mike exports all around the world, multiple cases. Tell me how, as American manufacturing with other folks who are trying to shed jobs overseas, how are you able to compete in a multitude of countries and get that done?
Well, what Shield Ag's done, you can see we're 75 years old, but in the last 10 years we've reinvented ourselves to really focus on sustainable agriculture. That's a more sustainable footprint and the ability for underdeveloped countries to grow their own food. And by doing that, we've positioned some of our products so that countries other than the United States that want access to U.S. agricultural technology come and find us. And that's where we've been successful in our export markets.
Okay, fantastic. Describe a little more. You had, I think, 7 different regulations you'd identified, and can you pick one of them out? And for those of us not in the business, say, hey, this is what it's doing to me.
I picked the ones that are impediments to me putting up more plant property and equipment by looking at which ones I would have to file paperwork on. And remember, big companies will complain about this stuff too, but it's just me and some great managers making payroll every Friday. So if I want to put up 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 square feet, I got a lot of stuff to do. And I also run heat treat facilities and things like that, which are subject to all these EPA things. It's just not worth the hassle. I didn't want to pick on any one particular organization, but when I see the flood of recent regulations and updates to regulations since about 2009, I say, those are targeted right at me. So why should I want to do it? I'll just continue to do what I can within the walls of my own building as I grow my revenues.
Mm-hmm. And Ms. Schindler, what has been your experience with the implementation or the new regulations coming out of the President's health care plan and response from your employees? Mr. Bergmeyer indicated he's capped the number of employees he's going to hire. He's not going to cross that 50-employee threshold. Your thoughts?
For us, as I said, we remain optimistic. We took a serious approach to wellness and looked at our health plans. And we actually moved to a high-deductible health plan with a health savings account probably 5 years ago. So there's been a lot of education just about being consumers of your medical needs. You know, you wouldn't buy a car just with the salesman saying, hey, trust me, buy it. So we've done a lot of education for our staff to just understand how to be better prepared for going to the doctor and their medical needs. So for us, there's a lot that you don't know. I mean, we had to try to understand it just with, we bring in a lot of college students, which, you know, we love, because for us, our back to school time of year is now. We're preparing for all the colleges taking art materials. And so we bring in about 15 to 20 college students for the summer. And we weren't sure what that was going to mean with the Health Care Act. And I said, look, in the end, we can't change our business practice. We just have to understand what it may mean and then keep talking about that. I think for us, as we understand it, I know that this year our renewal, there's a 5% increase that we're going to have to bear just because of the act. But we strive to say, okay, there's a challenge. I have the same challenges with raw materials. I have the same challenges with all the different markets and trying to figure out who's the best partner to be able to sell to that consumer and understand the consumer in that market. And so our approach is really to say, well, with this opportunity, how can I increase more business? So we're always looking at growing the revenue side because we have these challenges. So that's how we're approaching it. We do understand the theory behind it, and we do believe that everyone needs to have health insurance. How it's going to pan out, we hope that dialogue continues so that you can ask us for that feedback. So, but there's a lot that's not, there's a lot that you're still developing, and we realize we have to partner in that development.
Yeah, and as was reported, I think yesterday or maybe even today, that the January 1st deadline, the regulations are behind schedule, and there's some things you don't know today, and maybe won't even know when on the deadline January 1st. So I appreciate the testimony. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.